Downsizing is certainly a growing trend among retiring homeowners in Canada who are looking to tap into the equity of their home to fund their retirement. Trade a smaller yard, a simpler floor plan, lower operating costs, a roof that doesn't need replacing. Seems like a slam dunk, especially given the massive jump of real estate values over the last 10 years or so. But as always, the devil is in the details. So in this video, we'll dive into the 8 things that you should think about as you consider downsizing in retirement. But first, if we haven't met, I'm Steve Willems, and I'm a wealth advisor with the Willems Wealth Planning Group out here in BC. We started this channel to help you plan for your own retirement and helping you think about ways to plan and arrange your investments, your income streams, and ideally reduce the amount of tax that you'll pay along the way. Now, if you find yourself in this camp, you're not alone. Ipsos did a study back in 2018, and they found that 34% of Canadian boomers, this would be age 55 plus at that time, plan to downsize in the next 5 years. And this can make sense. Hey, when the kids move out, you don't want to be left with all this unused space that can become increasingly difficult to maintain, especially perhaps as healthcare implications of aging kind of start to take effect. So let's dive into these biggest considerations you need to think about as you are planning to downsize in retirement. Up first, you need to estimate your cost savings. Look at what your lower utilities will look like, your lower property tax. Potentially, you might even be able to defer that anyway. The consideration of eliminating debt, lower maintenance, new strata costs, potentially lost rental income might hurt this calculation. You need to figure out the sum, the net effect of all of those changes and figure out how it will align with your budget. Perhaps a local real estate agent might be able to help you run some of these numbers as well. Up next, you don't want to get shocked by the cost. In that Ipsos report I just mentioned, it's interesting to note that in their research, they found that 27% of those who had already downsized reported that the costs incurred for the move were more than they expected. What costs? Well, we're talking about legal costs. In BC, property transfer tax costs, real estate commissions. You add all of these things up and all else equal, you will have a lower net worth at the end of the year in the year that you sell your home than at the start. These costs are friction. They are an expense to you in the year that you sell. See, the other thing that you need to think about as we think about costs is how are you going to fund this? How will you fund a deposit? Typically, when you sign an offer on a new home, you would secure that contract with the payment of a deposit, which secures the contract. You need to think about where's that cash coming from. Is it going to come from a bank account that you already have set up with the cash? If you don't, well, you need to use a line of credit. Perhaps you have to sell assets in your non-registered account to fund that deposit, maybe a draw from your tax-free savings account as a last resort. Where's the deposit going to come from? The third item, you want to do a local market pulse check. What you want to do here is you want to get help looking at the current market, how it can impact the selling price of your current home and perhaps the affordability of the downsized properties that you'd be thinking about moving into. Any property arbitrages or spreads, what we'll see sometimes is there might be a significant gap between a detached home and a age-restricted townhome level property. From other times, depending on what's going on in the local real estate market, that spread, that gap between those two property types, it might narrow. And so how is that going to affect your decision making? Are there any market conditions that might dictate whether an offer should be subject to sale of your current home, or do you not need to worry about that? Again, professional advice at the local level is going to help you make many of these decisions, but it's something that you want to give thought to ahead of time. Up next, location, location, location. You've heard it said. Proximity to family and friends, whether you want to stay close to or get some distance from some of these people, you also want to be thinking about proximity to amenities, shopping centers, outdoor experiences, good health care perhaps that might be needed later on. We've had one client in the last couple of years here move out from the city where we're at currently all the way out to a remote island north of Vancouver Island. They'd lived in Abbotsford, where we're at here, for many, many years, and found at this point that they just wanted a different life. They wanted a different dynamic, a little bit more off-grid. And for them, that location was a massive part of the draw of why they wanted to make that move. And it worked out really well financially at the same time. And so this is certainly, you're seeing something more and more people do. Statistically, about 40 to 50 50% of folks will actually move outside of their local market when they do this downsize. And so this story that we're seeing, it's not anecdotal. It is actually more common than you might think. Up next, you need to be thinking about housing type, strata or detached, pros and cons of each. Do you want to be outsourcing the maintenance? Do you want a newer build? Do you want autonomy to not be confined to the rules of operating a home inside a strata society? The other thing you might want to think about is, down the road, if you plan to age in place, you want to think about single level living. Is that more suitable and better for your comfort or safety? Other options that come to mind as we think about housing types, are you going to go straight into a retirement community if you're further along in the journey, or are you going to be caring for an aging parent and perhaps moving in with a child? What will that look like? It's just good if you can kind of map out these steps. We obviously don't know what we're going to want, 10 years from now, but we can gain a lot of wisdom from looking at ways that other people have done this progression really well and ways that people have perhaps regretted their decisions if they were to reflect back on them. Up next, the idea of timing. When you're thinking about timing, we're looking at, do you want to do this before or after retirement? Generally speaking, we recommend doing this downsize after retirement. By separating these two events and maintaining housing stability through that first big change of retirement, it allows you to be more emotionally prepared to handle the subsequent changes that come with changing your physical space around. Up next, decluttering and possessions. You want to be thinking through, how will the new space have room for all your stuff? Will it? Will it not? If it's not, it's time to cleanse. You can do this on your own. You can have family help. You could also ask for professional help. There are true professionals who will actually help you navigate the psychological effects of a meaningful move from a lifelong family home to something that looks a lot different. There's also the idea of splitting the purchase and sale transactions perhaps by a few months, which will give you time to move, assuming you can complete and finance the purchase all on your own. There is, of course, a risk in this scenario of a downtrending real estate market, perhaps eroding the equity on the larger home in percentage terms. So let's say you're going from a detached home that's worth $1 million, and you're looking to go into a condo that's worth $700,000, and let's say both of those properties in a downtrending market are down 10%. Well, the sale value on your principal home, your detached home, is maybe down $100,000, while perhaps the townhome is down $70,000. You're going to be left that because of that spread with less in your pocket as a result of that downsize. So that is the risk of separating the sale and the purchase of those two transactions and there being time between them. It is typically better to try to sync up the timing of these two transactions, but if you're okay bearing that risk, then perhaps that's still fine for you. The final piece is just thinking about your future needs. Can the space accommodate guests? Can you host family dinners? What will the family dynamics look like? Will they change? What you don't want here is you don't want the tail wagging the dog, right? Many people in this stage of their life will make housing decisions on the basis of now wanting to accommodate or host their growing family. But perhaps financially it doesn't make sense for them to do that, or physically it doesn't actually make sense for them to be in a home so big so that they can still host the once a year family gathering. Maybe it's time for those traditions to take a new shape. Maybe it's time for a child to host that family dinner instead of mom and dad needing to stay in a home longer than they perhaps needed to host that one-off occasion. If this is something that you're thinking about doing, it's best to trust your gut and just go for it. The final nugget from that Ipsos study found that of those who had done the move, the downsize, only 8% said they regretted it or found that the transition was more trouble than maybe it was worth. The implication here is that 92% gave the decision a thumbs up. And that's been our experience too, especially when we're giving proper thought around all of these issues together and having proper conversation around it. Hey, if you want help navigating big life decisions like this, we've walked hundreds of people down this very road. If you'd like a second set of eyes on your downsize decision, or if you just want to get started, we are giving away a free 45-minute chat with myself or someone from our team. I'll put a link in the description for you to get started with that first meeting. So these are the 8 factors to help establish a framework for how to think through this downsize decision. If it's been helpful, give us a video a thumbs up. We'd love to hear your feedback. If there's anything that you think that we missed, drop those in the comments below. As always, subscribe and we'll make sure that you get front row access to all the next couple videos that we'll be producing. As always, thanks. We'll see you next time.